Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Linda Attore. She's president and CEO of Laurel House. We'll meet her and learn all about Laurel House when we come back, so stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is a first-timer on the show. Her name is Linda Attore. She is president and CEO of Laurel House, Resources to Recover. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me here.
Let's tell everybody what Laurel House is.
Sure. Laurel House is an organization that provides resources and opportunities for people living with mental illness. Our goal is to help them recover, to regain their place in their local communities, and we do that through employment, education, housing, psychosocial rehabilitation, teaching them life skills, a variety of whatever they might need.
Now you serve about 8 communities in Lower Fairfield County?
That's correct. All the towns from Greenwich up through Wilton, Weston, and Westport.
And now if somebody happens to be watching from a different part of the state, you could certainly refer them to something that might be more appropriate for them, correct?
Absolutely, and I appreciate you saying that because that's the concept of Resources to Recover. We don't think that we have all the answers or that we could personally go out to see every person who needs our help, but we will make the arrangements to get the right person there.
Now, talk to me about mental illness in general. Certainly misunderstood, misdiagnosed a lot, I would imagine, and certainly probably in many cases the opportunities, they are there, more so now, especially with a place like Laurel House, but a lot of people just don't know.
That's
what
correct.
to do, where to go, what to do.
That's correct. Starting with your comment about even misdiagnosed, there are, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, there are 1 in 17 people who are affected by some level of mental illness, not just mild depression, some level of mental health issues.
But mild depression certainly is in the category of some type of mental illness, correct?
Correct, okay. Correct. But I'm talking about people that 1 in 17 have severe mental health issues. And other studies, you'll hear it's considered to be even more pervasive than that. NAMI, which stands for the National Alliance for Mental Illness, reports that as many as 1 in 4 families is somehow affected, either with a direct family member, a close friend, an associate. So it's that close to them, is touched by that. So in the course of that many people potentially being diagnosed at some point or not, there is a great deal of misunderstanding. And for youth, for young people and young adults, just because they're growing and they're changing and they're going through all the normal things kids do, those diagnoses can change frequently. And so I wouldn't say so much that they're misdiagnosed as is different symptoms are presenting themselves at different points. So it's kind of evolves, if you will.
And if the numbers might be surprising to people as far as how many people might actually have some sort of mental illness, those that are either unaware or just never pursued any sort of medical treatment, that number would make it even much more staggering, I would imagine, right?
Correct. In terms of those people that are actually diagnosed or seek treatment. And particularly for young adults, it's troubling. A lot of youth have dropped out of school. As much as 50% is reported because of mental health issues, and yet they don't seek the services that are probably available to them in most schools, disability services. And it's really a rich set of offerings in many places, but they're either embarrassed to disclose that they have an illness, so there is still a stigma associated with that, or they really just don't know where to go. And we, in particular at Laurel House, focus on young adults, so it's 18 and up, and all adults. And there we do supported education, for example, for individuals who are seeking post-secondary education. So maybe they've gotten their GED or maybe they've completed high school, but they just can't be successful at college. So that's the type of situation where we would want to know so we could help.
Now, you mentioned that you serve 18 and up, all adults. Is there more, is it, for those younger, is there something that's more specific and more designated for minors, for youth in general, that would be more appropriate for them?
What you'll find is in most towns, in most cities, and again, this is part of the labyrinth of knowing where to go,
Yeah.
which we're hoping to demystify. But they're very excellent and reputable locations. I could mention a number in Stamford that, in particular, that work strictly with children. Mm-hmm. And in fact, many of them will say they work with a child up to 18, but in fact, they may work with them up until the age of 21 because they haven't completed high school yet. Yeah. So it really just depends on the facility. And we're trying to partner with a lot of those individuals so no one drops through the cracks.
How did Laurel House come to be?
Laurel House originated in 1984 at a time frame that a lot of similar types of service organizations like that popped up across the country, a lot of it because funding was made available by the federal government. And also, coincidentally, there were a lot of people being deinstitutionalized. You know, a lot of hospitals were releasing individuals who really needed to not be in the hospital, but also didn't really have a place to go.
They were caught in between, weren't they?
Correct. Yeah. And so there were all kinds of names for these things, day programs, clubhouse, which was the original term for many years that Laurel House was, where people could go there. They could even have a work routine around the events of the clubhouse or the day program. But the idea was to give them a space that they could recover, you know, and they could have a peer support community, which was very, very important to know that other people were suffering the same problems.
I think you touched on something key there. If people, if they can get past their pride, or if they have the information available to them to pursue some sort of treatment with Laurel House, I think one thing you mentioned, the ability to be able, you can recover, can't you?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And there's very encouraging numbers, and of course there's controversy about which numbers are right and so on. But a number of psychiatric studies have indicated that as many as anywhere from 80 to 90% of people can recover from the debilitating side effects of mental illness. But the recovery is a lifelong process.
And so, you may take some dips along the way, too.
That's correct. And actually some can be very severe. It could be construed as a relapse, or someone has to be hospitalized. So we measure success by people not having to be hospitalized and being able to develop coping skills where they sense that things are not as well as they should be, and that they're using their network of their families and their support systems and their peers and people like the Laurel House staff to help them say that, you know, maybe they're having some difficulties. So that's very important, to be a piece of a community, whether it's a small network or a larger, broader network.
Now, you're not a doctor, correct?
I'm not.
From your point of view, can you see progress being made in general as far as mental health goes? Very
much so. And if I could share it, my personal connection to this cause, I am a business person by trade. I've had a lot of experience in the nonprofit world, being on boards, very active member of boards such as New Britain EMS in New Britain, Connecticut for 6 years. And so I understand the world of nonprofit, but my career has really been around business and technology and healthcare. So this was quite a change. But the personal commitment all along has been that my mother was schizophrenic. And I'm very familiar on a day-to-day basis with what it takes to, you know, for that individual to cope with the illness, but also what the family does to cope with it. So in answer to your question, I can see as good as the treatment I'm sure that she was given, and I know how committed our family was to getting her to a point of recovery. The difference in the tools and the resources available, light years.
Is that right? That's a good sign.
It absolutely is, and significant progress in spikes in time too that you can see, and where people would frequently be hospitalized, and that was really the only answer. And where shock treatments, for example, which are a viable treatment for certain things, were used much more routinely. So I have great optimism about our ability to treat it, the clinical ability to treat it, and all the support services around it.
Another key thing that you touched on, when it comes to mental illness and a person's ability with help to recover, but also the effect that it has on family and other people around you. And that's, it so affects other people as well. Talk about that a little bit.
It does. And many of the people we serve now, it may not be the person with the mental illness who approaches us. It would be a family member or a friend or a coworker. And they don't even know how to begin the path of either having the discussion to get someone to recognize that they have that severe of a problem, to get them to the proper medical care, maybe primary health care too. It isn't just an issue of mental health, it's also primary care issues that occur because of the mental health. So the whole concept of getting the family involved is basic. Now, unfortunately, many of the people, a lot of the older individuals, for example, that have worked for a long time with Laurel House, they don't necessarily have a family. We are their family.
Yeah.
And many of these programs, that is the case, and particularly people who had been institutionalized at one time. Their families, they may have been alienated from their families, or their families are just not alive, to support them. But Sean, you hit it. I mean, this is a support network, whether it's an acquired family or it's their biological family. That's key to that person's success and recovery.
And I think support-wise, in this day and age, when social media is so prominent and the internet, the support groups, I would imagine, are available, and just information and resources, so much more so are available out there, as long as you're willing to, first of all, identify it somehow, and then just push yourself in that direction to seek out info, knowledge.
Correct. But you almost need a guide for that too, though, because the information is frankly overwhelming in some cases. And remember earlier when you mentioned about misdiagnosing, there are a lot of people who sort of follow the idea, and I'm one of them too, with WebMD, you diagnose everything yourself before you go see your doctor.
That'll solve everything,
yes. But there are a lot of people who think they have something or their family member has something, and so they go to a variety of sites. And there's a lot of good sites out there, some very credible sites, but it's where do you start? And now, how is it actionable? What do you do with that information that you just read? So part of our resources to recover is also the use of that technology and guiding and vetting the information for individuals.
I think a lot of people also in this day and age are under the impression that they can get a prescription, pop a pill, and everything will be fine. I'm not sure where you stand on the on that aspect of it, medication versus so many other resources that are available to work toward recovery from your mental health issues.
Well, we enormously value the clinician. And the use of the medicines, the appropriate medicines, and compliance with it, staying with it.
Right.
I can see that from my own past experience, as I said, with our family. That's when a lot of hospitalizations happened in our case, in my mother's life, because she either refused to take her medicines or forgot to.
Yeah.
And so it had to be closely monitored. And so, again, part of the support system is something a little bit off. Maybe someone is not taking their medication, or the medication, maybe they've lost a lot of weight and the medication is too strong for them. There are a variety of those things, but the medicines that are available are so important for someone's recovery. And to have the right person, the right doctor who's really listening, the right prescriber, listening to the symptoms and to the progress. So to me, it's instrumental in all the support services that go with it.
We're going to take a break and come back and talk more. Is there a website people can go and learn more about Laurel House?
Yes, absolutely. I have to go to www.laurelhouse.net.
And what's on the website for people to go and see?
A little bit about the history, not a lot, but a little bit about the history that you and I just discussed about Laurel House, but more about those resources that are available, and also some success stories, people that are in education programs and in employment. So we do try and let people know all the successful programs that are available to them.
All right, website is up on the screen. Go check it out. In the meantime, we'll take a break and come back. Linda Attore is the president and CEO of Laurel House. We're going to be right back in just a few. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us.
Mental illness. Used to be you talked about it in whispers. Not anymore, I'm happy to say. Because here in Connecticut, there's an organization called Laurel House, with wonderful resources for people living with mental illness. What I like about Laurel House is their serious and open effort to help people recover and basically live a normal life, not alone, and with hope.
Laurel House, resources to recover.
Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is Linda Attore, President and CEO of Laurel House, which serves a number of communities, around 8 or so communities down in Lower Fairfield County. What's the day-to-day duties of the President and CEO like? I'm sure it's very different depending on the day, correct?
Correct. Well, first of all, we're a small organization, so as President and CEO,
you have a lot of hats.
Pretty approachable,
yeah.
too. And if you ever have the opportunity to come down to Stamford, we'd love to have you come down. You'll see in our resource center, which is our main building, clients, members, program participants, as however they prefer to refer to themselves, will come and go all throughout the organization. It's very accessible. So there is not a day that I don't speak to someone who we're providing service to. They'll just come by to say hello or ask if they can speak with me. Now, granted, I'm not a clinician, so as soon as I see I'm out of my element, that's the nature of it, I direct them to the right resource. But frequently, they're just really proud to tell you about the job that they just got, with the help from someone on board with us, or that they're making their way back into supported education. They just took their first course. There are many, many reasons that someone stops by. And there's also times when they're not feeling well. And so we're sometimes the first person before the clinician to see that things aren't going as well as they could be. So I then would very quickly get in touch with a staff person who works more closely with them. And in many cases, we might be on the phone with their clinician and making sure that an appointment is set and that there's really nothing more to be alarmed about than that.
You were talking earlier about success stories, and I'm wondering if some of them in the course of their life at this point will come back in some aspect and maybe counsel others or talk about their experiences and kind of help those others along a little bit.
Yeah, Sean, you've hit the heart of what is called peer support, and people do that now on a regular basis. We have many workshops and forums that are very open. So we publish the schedules. We make them available to everyone, so whether it's someone who's receiving our service now or someone at some time who's received it, people are welcome. And that counseling, that sort of mentoring and advising and a shoulder for others who are receiving service is so powerful when it comes from someone who's walked in their shoes. Right. So you'll see that a great deal, and that's typical of the mental health industry too. There are a lot of positions they're actually funded that are called peer support. So they want someone who has had that problem and is either on the road to recovery or is fully recovered in some way, and they're able to help someone along that way.
Yeah, it's one thing to have someone from the staff, whether it be the president or a clinician, but if it's somebody who's literally gone through the program that they are going through now, as far as the best word of mouth that there possibly can be.
Absolutely.
The interesting thing is, we were talking about this earlier, over the course of time as medical advancements move on, that I can see when you were talking about it that gives you hope. In a way, you almost want to put yourself out of business. Not that it'll ever happen as far as mental health goes, but progress being made. That's another example of how somebody can be happy and know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely, and I would say one thing that characterizes Laurel House is hope. I mean, it's palpable. We have people on our staff who see hope in almost a situation that it would be very hard to see hope. Yeah. And yet they see some thread of an opportunity for someone to get well or to identify a skill in which they can master it and feel accomplished and feel good about themselves. So I agree with you, and I like the idea of if we could be in a situation, particularly for the homeless that we serve, if they all had appropriate, safe, affordable housing. We'd be out of business on the homelessness side of it. We would still be providing support services to them to help them be successful as a tenant or a homeowner. But it would be a wonderful scenario to know that there weren't homeless because there were enough adequate housing.
Is the economy that we're in now add to the frustrations of whether you have a mental illness or you're homeless, or or any of those things, it certainly doesn't help the situation.
It doesn't, but you know, to even relate for a moment to people that have that anxiety, I know you and I talked before about the storm, Sandy, and you know how it really turned people, turned their lives upside down. And I know many of us had anxious moments about that, and that little bit of, you know, going without power for 8 days or whatever it might have been just doesn't even compare to the anxiety, the level of anxiety and concern that someone could have moment to moment just because, you know, they're either anxious about being around people or they're fearful of, you know, are they going to be able to stay on the job? Is it too much for them? I mean, I'm almost glad that I experienced the little bit that I experienced in the storm to recognize not just how fortunate all of us are, but that's what it feels like when people are, you know, just panicked.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of my colleagues say the same thing too. So it's a teeny dose of reality of what people are living with.
I want to glean down to depression for a moment with you, and I just want to talk about that, especially in terms of, you know, there's such a thing as situational depression, which pretty much everybody deals with, you know, and then there are more severe things, but situational depression is like sort of something that occurs in your life, whether it's a loss of a loved one or maybe the ending of a relationship or something like that, and more so than anything else, really, that's just something that people just sort of have to deal with and get over with, something that in society's mind isn't that severe. Would you still be able to help somebody in something like that, or is it more severe things?
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be our target audience, so to speak, but every one of us, you're right, everyone on the staff, we all deal with that. And I think if we pay attention to the coping skills that we're teaching other people and use them on ourselves,
absolutely,
that would be very helpful. But to your point, the people we would frequently work would be persistent mental illness, and that they wouldn't necessarily just be able to cope with it by themselves. And your point, though, about situational or episodic, that could turn into something extremely severe. We've had people who are profoundly affected by 9/11. It changed their lives forever. So is that situational, episodic? Perhaps it set off a course of things that was always there. But I would never, you know, dismiss the significance of situational or episodic
especially
depression.
if you can't identify it and you don't take steps to treat it in some way, because like you said, it could turn into something more severe.
Correct.
We talked a little bit a while ago about funding. How are you funded, first of all?
We have a variety of funding streams. We are fortunate to receive funding from the state, and there's different organizations within the state. The Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services has been very generous in funding to us. So has the Department of Social Services. There are certain types of grants that are funneled from the federal government through the state. They're called block grants. That's another source of funding. We receive HUD funding, so for urban development, and that's for housing. In addition, we have grants from foundations, from various organizations. All of these are competitive, and you apply for them and compete for them. And then beyond that, we also do private fundraising.
Much like any nonprofit would do, you know, and you can go to your website, and your big fundraiser is in May.
Yes, it is.
And so people can go there and learn. If you want to talk a little bit about that fundraiser.
Well, thank you. I always would like to talk about that. We're very excited about, we're having a very big fundraiser for us. You know, we've never tried anything to this level. It's going to happen to be on Kentucky Derby Day, so it gives us a natural theme, which we're going to play heavily into.
Right.
And it's Laurel House's Derby Dinner Dance. So we've already sent save the date cards out, and there is information on the website about that. And the point of it is not just a fundraiser, it's for visibility. It's for people who have a common interest or concern around mental health, either for their families, themselves, their friends, and it gives them an opportunity to be with other people that are as passionate about that and are committed to recovery. And then, of course, fundraising is a piece of it. But it'll be a fun evening where people, like-minded people who are very interested in addressing these needs will be.
I'll have you give the website out one more time so people can go and a little bit learn more about that, the fundraiser, and everything else that's on the website.
Thank you. Again, it's www.laurelhouse.net. And I did want to mention, when you were asking about the funding streams too, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of articles in the paper about, you know, the state situation, and I can tell you, we and many other responsible agencies recognize that public funding can't be our only support. So if we feel strongly about our cause and we want to extend our services and broaden it, you know, we have an obligation to find other sources of funding as well. So while it's wonderful that we have that, we also believe that in having private fundraising, we can expand our services to people who maybe don't qualify for public assistance, but need the service just as desperately.
Linda Atari, she's president and CEO of Laurel House. Pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks.
Sean, thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of For the Record. Be sure to visit our YouTube site for this and many other shows. I am Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. We will see you next time. Take care.